Wait a second. This isn't your grandma's cancer show.
Not your grandma's cancer show.
Hi, I'm Tatum Durock, and today we're talking about exercise after cancer. And I know for some of us, exercise might have already been a really massive part of our life. And this time can be really confronting, maybe wanting to get back to it, maybe feeling that we can't get back to it. But for others of us who have maybe avoided exercise like the plague, who have maybe never run a marathon in our lives and now feeling like, what, do I have to run a marathon now? So whether or not you were a exercising fiend or someone like me that was picked last in gym class, this is a really fun episode because I've got two amazing guests with me. I've got Carolyn Garritt and Gemma Seager, who are both personal trainers with cancer expertise and their own story to share. And I've actually got Carolyn sitting right here beside me in the studio, which is really fun. Welcome.
Thank you, Tatum.
So can you tell me what was happening in your life when you were diagnosed, exercise-wise?
Exercise-wise, I was already a cancer specialist personal trainer. I was fit, I was strong, and when I was diagnosed, it was the very start of lockdown. So I was already in the trade. I had studied and written about cancer prehab. I had studied and written about, I know, and then it hit. So for me, it was a very unusual trajectory.
Yeah.
You know, there's quite a lot of, I've come across several people whose exercise and rehab prompted, after cancer prompted doing more. But for me, it was completely the reverse.
Yeah. So you already knew a huge amount. Did you feel there was sort of an extra pressure on you?
No.
That's good.
I always imagined, I think it was, so I did a little bit of reading before I came, and I think it was Gemma who said she didn't imagine being one of the 1 in 2. I did. So my dad had prostate cancer, my mum had breast cancer. I knew the statistics. I knew as a woman who was, so I'm slightly over the age for shine at diagnosis, but I knew that at my age, with my long-standing love of gin, having not had children, having always been curvy, I've always been active, but always been curvy, I knew I fitted the bill. As somebody who would get breast cancer, I imagined I'd be a bit older, but still I knew I fitted the stereotype, if you like. So, for me, I was very fit, very active, but it meant that I went into this really knowledgeable. So I knew things that I could do to manage my own levels of anxiety and emotional stuff while I was waiting for treatment. I was really lucky. A lot of people talk about gratitude during cancer, which can sound really cheesy, but I was lucky.
And so for you, was there a sense of loss, as you were going through treatment, of kind of the strength and vitality that had come so easily before? Yeah. Did you ever wonder, am I going to ever get that back?
I didn't. So again, in terms of luck and gratitude, my cancer was found quite accidentally. I thought I'd sprained a pectoral muscle, boxing using weights. And it wasn't that, but my cancer was diagnosed really early. I was stage 1. I opted to have a mastectomy because my cancer was very near my heart and I didn't want radiotherapy. And I didn't need chemotherapy because it was stage 1, it's so early. So in terms of loss and being impacted, I was impacted by surgery and I've been impacted ever since by hormones, by tamoxifen. I didn't doubt for a minute I'd get back, to be truthful. In fact, I've been quite bloody-minded.
Tell me about this bloody-mindedness.
Well, for me, and bear in mind, I have been working with people with cancer for a decade, as a personal trainer for a decade. And for me, I was aware of that sense of loss of physicality, it's too important to me. I've met and I deeply respect so many people who aren't particularly interested in being active. It's just not their thing. Whereas for me, I have been. I've always been a runner. I've always been outdoorsy. As I say, I've never been a gym bunny, or I've certainly never had to worry about being underweight, shall we say. But I wanted to be strong, and I didn't want to have to do anything differently simply because I've had breast surgery and simply because I'm rampagingly menopausal. So I can't remember anything, and it's certainly it has affected my confidence. I'm willing to fess up to that. You know, there's a lot of stuff around self-image and self-confidence, and I think a lot of people's self-confidence was affected by the pandemic and how you feel walking into a room. I'm lucky in that my self-image has normally been quite, I was going to say strong, but actually ambivalent. It's like, I think I'm good enough, you know. I don't tend to wear a prosthesis. I tend to go around as a uni boober, and most of the time I feel okay about that. It shakes a little, and I think that's menopause. You're nodding.
Yes, and Gemma's got
that. I got plunged into that with no warning.
yeah. But it's to be truthful, in terms of loss and fear and reticence for me personally, it's been much more around menopause and hormones than around cancer and surgery.
Interesting. So how do you feel? Do you feel that exercise has helped you then manage some of those?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
And the biggie for me, and it's certainly translated into what I do, it'd be interesting to hear what Gemma says. I am so much more focused on strength training these days, above cardio, above flexibility to a degree, although I know we need flexibility in order to be strong. What I do for myself and what I do with my clients is much more about lifting weights, lifting heavier weights. That's been the biggie. And so therefore my sense of physical strength is better. And it's little details in the day. I went on holiday a few weeks ago, and my ability to lift the big bag up into the Uber is just, it's way more than it was, most definitely.
So you've written a book.
Yeah.
Called Getting Your Oomph Back. Why did you call it Oomph?
So I called my business Oomph years ago, and I wanted it to be something that was about return, about recovery, about restoring something. And actually, my partner endlessly takes the mickey out of my accent, and I wanted it to be something that sounded comically northern.
Excellent.
So Oomph, it just is. And the book started, so I've worked with the Maggie's Centres. I don't know how much crossover there is between Shine and the Maggie's Centres, but they're brilliant. Mm-hmm. I've worked with Maggie's for a long time, and I started doing talks for them. And because I'm old school, I would do a handout and people would ask me for a sheet, and they'd ask me, particularly if we'd done workout sessions or whatever, they'd ask me for something on paper that was what we'd done. And that, I just ended up with a few of them. And I've always loved writing. So those sheets became a blog, and the blog became a book. And I'd written the book before my own diagnosis. Well, I thought I'd finish it, actually. Lockdown, it all got very exciting, and everybody thought they'd be able to do their pet projects.
Yeah.
I was going to finish my book. I had cancer instead.
It derails all those plans, doesn't
did.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it meant that my voice felt different, to be truthful. So I put in some stuff in the book about my own experiences, and I rewrote bits of it, frankly, because I'm now writing about us, not you.
Yes.
Us, not we, we, not them. So it changed a little bit. But again, the sequence isn't what people expect. But
yeah, it's really, really fascinating. And what you were saying about like a handout, I was doing a training recently in person where the tables were getting together to talk. And I was like, oh, it's like breakout rooms. but in person. And you're like, wow, yeah, the pandemic has really affected us.
Yeah.
But it's also brought together people that were maybe a bit more isolated, that didn't have access. So what's like maybe some of the things that you did to kind of bring people together? Did you develop online programs?
Yeah. I was telling Gemma earlier about this thing that I started called the Big Strong Lasses. And actually, that name, again, it's rather northern sounding. It was a throwaway remark that I made once. Online, Zoom-based weight training for women with breast cancer. We have some women doing it that are stage 4, which I think is wonderful. A weekly workout on Zoom, which I then record and send back to them for them to repeat. And the biggie hasn't necessarily been about the strength training itself. Lots of people know that they would benefit from strength training. It's a really important part of cancer rehab. But getting over that sense of isolation. So I leave everybody's microphones on. So there's loads of chit-chat. It's lovely, delightful thing to be part of. And we talk and we share wisdom. When I get a minute, because I know I'm focusing so much on breast cancer, I intend to do one for men. I intend to do something for people with all cancers. The breast cancer thing is partly because it was part of my own rehab, but also because there's specific functional things around the surgery to the lymphatic system that just needs a bit of focus. We also did online sessions through Maggie's. Several of the charities did online sessions.
Because I think that's the thing. So I have to admit, I'm not a massive traditional kind of what we think of as exercise person. I'm highly uncoordinated. I flail forward, and that's my version of running. And I'm sticking to it. People laugh if I run for a bus. I am a yoga teacher, so I do like activity. I love dancing and things like that. Like, I like moving my body, but in terms of kind of a structured or a coordinated way of doing it, a bit less so. And I remember being in that pit of chronic fatigue and feeling that I was failing so badly because other people were able to do so much more during that time. And I'd love to bring Gemma into the conversation here. Gemma, how has it been hearing from Carolyn?
I feel like Carolyn's story feels almost like the opposite of mine. I was the person who was picked last in gym at school. I got sent to the headmistress once for swearing at a PE teacher because she tried to make me play rounders. So yeah, I always was that person right up until my 30s when I started to get into things. I started playing roller derby, which is a contact sport on roller skates. Look it up. It's a long story otherwise. And
that's the thing. What Carolyn was mentioning was that community. And what I hear about roller derby, it is... Yeah. Like, that's the thing, is that even if you're not into something for the exercise, for that kind of pure, I'm going to do this, so much of exercise is about coming together with other people for some of us. Yes. And
I was very into weight training. I did run. I've never been fast, but I did get out and run. I did a few half marathons and things. But I was also very into weight training, squats and deadlifts. I had like 120 kilo deadlift that I was very proud of.
Wow.
And then I trained as a personal trainer kind of then later in life when I just found this like love for it outside of the idea of it always has to be some kind of punishment for weight loss or something. And I just wanted to help other people find that. And then lockdown happened and I have multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer, which is most common in men over 65. So at 40, I was obviously a prime target for that. But how we discovered it is I was doing squats with some weights at home over lockdown and injured my back. And I guess similar to you, I thought, I just injured myself exercising and it would pass. So maybe that's a bit similar. But it didn't pass. And after a long fight and a long story, which we don't need to go into now, eventually I had an MRI and it turned out I had a collapsed vertebrae in my spine. So that was all a bit dramatic, but that meant that kind of running and exercise and a lot of what I'd been doing over lockdown was just immediately taken away from me completely, because I could barely walk at some points. And then obviously the advice was not to, you've got a fractured vertebrae, and they didn't know how stable it was. And so I had steroids and treatment for that. And as the pain went away, I just didn't know what I was allowed to do.
Yeah.
And you don't get advice. Very few people get advice on what exercise they could do as during their cancer treatment, especially if you then have complications like spinal issues and like I had, or if it's a blood cancer or something that might metastatic cancer that might affect your bones. So then it was later on, it was after that, because I was so frustrated about not being able to get any advice on what I could do, that I then went on and did my cancer exercise specialist qualification. So I had a stem cell transplant at Christmas 21. So it took me a lot longer to recover from that than I thought. And I do think, more guidance on exercise and things would just be so helpful for all of that. So yeah, my story is like almost the opposite. Like, I never thought this was going to happen, and then it did. So then I went into it. Yeah. So.
And kind of talking about, you mentioned sort of prehab, like both of you were in really strong places going into treatment. And for you, Gemma, like a collapsed vertebrae, that's such a big difference to then not be able to move anywhere near the same amount as you were before. How did that make you feel?
I mean, I'm fairly certain that my core muscles were holding my entire body up for some of the time when my spine wasn't working. So I think going in from a place of fitness was good for me. That's obviously not something you get a choice about, where you start from when you get a cancer diagnosis. You can't go back in time and change that. But I think that there is a lot you can still do once you get that cancer diagnosis. It's just about kind of listening to your body. But that kind of, it was really difficult for me to just adapt to the idea of not being able to do anything after I had discovered exercise. It was great.
Right. And that was like a real passion.
You were a bit like, yeah, who am I now?
Yeah, real identity in that, and community as well. So there's so much wrapped up in...
Yeah, especially, I mean, roller derby, I was part of a team. It was all very, and I mean, contact sports are out, apparently.
So
even the cancer exercise specialist course agrees with that.
Was there anything when you were doing the cancer specialism course that you found surprising?
I think one of the biggest surprises for me was that cancer exercise during chemotherapy can actually improve the efficacy. I know I was going to say that word wrong, but I managed it.
You did.
Of the treatment. I kind of knew that I knew it could help with fatigue and, muscle loss, weight loss or gain, all those kind of things, self-image, mental health, depression, blah. But when I found out that it could actually make chemotherapy more effective, that's astonishing. Yeah. So I think there's, increasing amounts of research, I think, into that, because there's not been a lot of research, but
that is fascinating.
So I've been in the game for a really long time. I've been doing this for 10 years. And when I was first qualified, it was really, really unusual for anybody to be advised to exercise during treatment. And there was the evidence that has emerged in the past few years has been so strong and increasingly focused on what was previously believed to be too risky. There was a really lovely study done, I think it was in Holland, and it was an exercise bike in the chemo suite, and people were cycling as they were having their infusions. And exactly as Gemma said, the drugs work better.
Really?
Yeah, it's bonkers.
Yeah, I saw that study.
we can absorb them. Our bodies can use the stuff in the drug. Our bodies can use it more
Wow.
if we're metabolizing them better.
You know, I was thinking as you were talking about your core muscles kind of holding up your spine, slightly differently for me, I think, because I'd had abdominal surgery, I think that my core muscles had sort of gone on holiday. They were like, oh no, like the landscape's changed here and we're out, peace out. And so everything had gone into my spine. And so, you know, then I had multiple prolapse discs and, you know, which was incredibly painful. And then because, you know, as we're all in this position, everyone was rather concerned in case the cancer had gone into my spine. So, you know, it was an awful lot of pain for something that is quite ordinary, but it isn't ordinary when you've just had cancer. And you think, wow, like if someone had said, oh, you've just had abdominal surgery, actually, you know, like it would be really interesting for you to kind of maybe, you know, think about what you could do to build up some strength. I think that would have been really useful information. You think of all the things afterwards that can maybe be offset by a little bit more guidance here and there.
Yeah, I agree. And it was something that I tried to really seek out as well, because I think mostly they're not used to dealing with people my age, people who are active, in either orthopedics or in the hematology, which is where my treatment takes place. So when I asked my orthopedic surgeon if I could run again, I don't know, you'd think I'd asked if I could fly.
Yeah.
They were like,
So I did see from stalking your Instagram that you have been running. And what have you just done recently?
Don't tell my orthopedic surgeon. His actual answer to that was maybe slowly on a treadmill, from which I heard good trainers and couch to 5K. But I did finish the Run Norwich 10K last summer.
Brilliant.
I've done it every year since it launched, and I was just that stubbornness, bloody mindedness.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way cancer is ruining my Run Norwich streak. I did the virtual version over lockdown, and that was after I'd already hurt my back. So I was like, there's no way it's stopping me doing it. So yes, I did. I was considerably slower than I used to do it, but also a lot faster than I thought I would be. There was a 2-hour cutoff, which I was worried I might not make, but actually I got around in it was like 92 minutes or something. Yeah. So it was hard, really, really hard.
I really liked how open you were about that. Like in the picture, you can see how chuffed you are. And like, you know, I was beaming just looking at it. But also then reading, yeah, it was hard. Like that's not necessarily, I sort of imagine that people that can run, because it is such an alien concept to me, you know, just kind of flow. But actually...
No.
Running's awful.
There are ways that you can
Explain this to me.
Okay, so there are ways that you can make running feel more manageable, and there's a lot about confidence. People have this idea that running is risky, and it's really interesting. Orthopedic surgeons, physiotherapists, often people that have clinical roles, they will advise against running because of the level of impact. But because of the level of impact, it's actually really helpful. So it's interesting listening to what Gemma was saying, because it's about managing risk and managing your own risk. And for many people don't want to run, which is fine, but it is a really, really good form of exercise if you want to try it. But you can make running feel much more pleasant. And you can slow down. There's no hurry. One of the biggies for me has been to not beat myself up about speed. I've been running for a long time. I'm slower than I was. One of the things I feared losing was my stamina. And I ran the virtual London Marathon last autumn. And I was I didn't tell anybody about it for ages because I kind of thought, I just haven't got the energy. But you're allowed to slow down. You're allowed to walk. It doesn't have to be this massive sprint. I've known people that are really good club runners. I've known people that have won races that I've been in, and they beat themselves up. People are very, very self-critical about their running, or they say, I'm not a runner, I just jog, or whatever. People criticise themselves, and it's such a shame because it is perfectly possible to turn the cameras outwards and look at the birds and look at the trees and smell and use your senses and slow it down so that you can enjoy it. Please.
Well, that's I think when people say, "Oh, I can't run," you think,
Of course you can.
"Of course you can." What they mean is, then they're not going to keep up with Mo Farah. You go, well, you don't have to. You can do what you like. There's no, basically, if you're not going to come first, why worry about it? Just take your time, enjoy it. I mean, I've always found no matter how slow I go with running, I focus very strongly on running. So I'm thinking about my breathing, I'm thinking, I'm focused, which is one of the reasons I found it quite meditative during lockdown before I injured myself, before my diagnosis, because all I could think about was running while I was doing it, or where I was going or whatever. I couldn't think about pandemics or where money was coming from and those kind of things. So I found it quite calming. And I think it's one of those things that people do. They think that I can't run because it's you have to go fast, and you go, no, you don't. You just have to put your trainers on and move one foot in front of the other, and you don't have to go a specific distance. You don't have to go a specific speed. You still get, if you do a race, you still get a medal and a banana at the end, and that's the only reason I do it.
Yeah, I say something similar when I'm teaching yoga, in that, like, getting into the pose, that there is no reward, there's no prize. Like, poses come and go, right? Like, throughout the course of your life, there might be days that you can do one thing and it might not come back again for a little while, and then one day it will. And but, like, can you be in your body that day and make that decision that feels like the right, nourishing decision for you? And to me, that's where the good stuff is, because then you can tune in at other times and go, do I like this? Is this good for me? And, if you're running and you're having kind of an experience that you're like, yes, this is, Kynwen from Shine, who's been on this podcast many times, she uses it as her meditation. And she struggled when because she had been quite a fast runner prior. And not getting those times actually was quite hard. But then she switched into triathlons because it was a little bit different. So it was kind of like not a direct parallel anymore. And so I'm imagining that you've both seen people like that are kind of like, okay, this is what I used to do, but now I want to get really good at something a little bit, like change it up post-cancer. What would you recommend to somebody? And I'll put this out to both of you.
I just always tell people to focus on what they can do rather than what they can't do. So for me personally, for example, I have got a lot more into yoga since my diagnosis. It's that focus on what I can do that's important. So my flexibility has improved massively, because obviously with spinal issues, there was a point when I couldn't even get my knees to my chest, when and you're like, that's supposed to be so easy. So I think that's the important thing to do, is not to think about all the things that you can't do, just think about what you can do. If today all you can manage is a walk to the end of the road, then that's fine. Walk to the end of the road, and if you get there and think you can do a bit more, walk back again and keep walking up and down so you're not too far from home. I think that's the important thing to focus on, just those little things that can keep you moving. And it doesn't have to be exercise.
Right.
Yeah. So I was going to come in with do what you love, which is a step on, and it can be dancing. Go to Zumba. Wriggle your bum. Stuff that is moving. To be honest, when we've talked about exercise and we've focused very much on sport or running or whatever, it can be gardening. It can be stuff. It just needs to be movement. It can be movement that's in really small. There's this lovely term, exercise snacks, rather than needing a meal. Little and often, it can sound a little bit trite, do some squats while the kettle's boiling, stand on one leg while you're brushing your teeth. It can sound quite simplified, but if for those who have either physical or mental barriers about the idea of putting on trainers, there's loads of other ways that we can crack this nut. We need to move. We need to be moving and we need to be using our muscles, but we can move in so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I find scrubbing the bath really bloody exhausting. And you were talking
I wouldn't
about
do that.
you have
Got to be a better choice than cleaning the bath.
Yeah, I mean, there's no joy in that. But you have an expression, getting out of puff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm actually out of puff. Like, it's physically hard. And I realised how hard it was when afterwards I went and laid down on the floor and in the hallway, exhausted before the next thing. And I'm like, okay, like, I feel like I can call that exercise. Yeah.
It's raising the heart rate.
All right, I'm asking two specialists. I can do this. I can, yeah.
Yes,
So if I don't like something,
changing
and
the
when I
bed
do,
If
sorry.
you want exhausting, change a king size duvet. That'll do it.
Yeah. Okay. So anything that you're doing that you're getting, and like, how out of breath or how out of puff are you talking? Like, tell me about that
So
description.
there's a whole range of stuff. Originally, the idea was particularly around cancer-related fatigue. There was for a long time an idea that the best place to be looking in terms of exercise was the kind of exercise where you're a bit warm and your breathing changes. So what would be classically thought of as moderate exercise, you can still talk. There's an idea that you're out of puff such that you can still talk in sentences, but you wouldn't be able to sing,
Okay.
which is quite specific.
Yeah.
Or that you might take your cardi off.
Okay. I mean, for us with hot flushes.
Yeah, I know,
Bacardi-
that's hard to measure.
I mean, that's also getting out of puff. I've definitely, I'm like, I swear that's got to be like using some calories, just being hot and cold all the bloody time.
Gotta help.
So speaking.
So that's around cardiovascular exercise.
Okay.
And that's around how we breathe. And when people are thinking, I don't know if Gemma's found the same, when people are thinking about exercising after a cancer diagnosis, they will very frequently turn their minds to walking. Walking to the end of the road is a classic, being able to post a letter. And what they often don't see is the need for us to use our muscles, and that is a little bit more difficult to fit into everyday life. But we do need, I know you want to talk a little while about the benefits of exercise after cancer. There's something very, very specific about how we use our muscles, and we need to be doing things that will tire the muscles out. So that point where your brain gets a message that either I want to put that down now or I want to sit down now, we need that.
Yeah, I mean, if,
And did anybody tell you that when you were diagnosed?
I had someone, I had an oncologist who had trained in Eastern medicine say something quite interesting, that was if you increase how much exercise from where you were before to afterwards, that did have an effect. But I don't know where she got those stats from. So that was, obviously this is like relayed information. And I remember at the time being like, oh, bloody hell, I just done my yoga teacher training. I was in a pretty good place, and I was like, that actually made me feel a bit more depressed because I was like, I'm so tired.
You think I can't increase that?
Oh, God. And so it's that, that thing of like figuring out what motivates you, because some people are really motivated by a stat. They're like, oh, love that. Bit of logic, putting that into thing. And then someone else will take that same thing and be like, oh, it's a stick I can beat myself with, and I'm going to should on myself. And I'm not being a good cancer patient because I'm now not exercising more than I did before. And so I found that quite challenging. Having that
if it helps,
information.
I have never heard that slant on the statistics. As far as I know, you disregard what happened before.
Okay.
And to the best of my knowledge, and I have an exceptionally menopausal brain and really, nearly swore then, nearly rubbish memory, but I've never seen that. I've only seen exactly the opposite, where regardless of what we were doing before diagnosis, it's almost like a clean slate. Our levels of activity, our levels of muscle building, to some degrees our levels of keeping our body fat down. Whole other podcast on that.
Okay.
Jesus.
Let's not go there. That was, especially if anyone's had steroids as part of their treatment.
I know. There's an awful lot here, but to the best of my knowledge, in terms of specifically exercise after a diagnosis, we have a clean slate and it's what we do from there on.
Yeah, I agree. Whatever point you are in your journey, anything is better than nothing at any point. And I think one of the things people do as well is think they have to start an exercise program, whereas actually a lot of it is about keeping moving, walking, little 10 minutes, those exercise snacks. You were talking about just anything is better than nothing. And if you can't think you're going to do some kind of progressive program, particularly while you're in treatment, because we know you have no idea how you're going to feel when you wake up. Some days there are days when someone could be waving a £50 note at you from across the room and you're like, no, I'm good, thanks.
I was like, £50. I was like, 50 million. I probably like on my fatigue days, I wouldn't have made it over.
And if you think, plenty of people end up with mobility problems either during treatment or as a result of treatment. So, you can exercise in a chair. There's a lot that we can do. We can move more in a chair. Whether that's wheelchair or furniture, there is such a range of things we can do. It doesn't have to be, like Gemma says, it doesn't have to be sign up for a training program, and it definitely doesn't have to be go for a run.
Because, sometimes when you're really, really, really tired, like actually what you need is to rest and then do some exercise. Like, I think that's also, I think sometimes some of us deplete ourselves, or the pressure of it makes us tired before we've even gotten there. And if there's other overthinkers like me. And sometimes, so for me, I started with, let's get a really good rest. And then, when I felt like that spurt of energy, have something already there. So plan for a spurt of energy. What might I like to do next? And for me, it was a little bit of novelty. And I saw in your book someone did croquet, and I was like, yeah, I'd probably give that a shot just because I've never done it. It sounds like something out of Alice in Wonderland, right?
I think of her as an Edwardian lady in a long white dress. She's a demon, though. I mean, this it's a gentle sport, but she's winning trophies. She's wiping people out of her league. I've done her a strength and conditioning program around how she swings her mallet.
Wow. I love this. I love making exercise, yoga, relaxation as unique as you are. And I think that's the thing, is it's understanding what motivates you and being really kind. Really, really kind to yourself about what you need.
I think the best advice I had when I was recovering from my stem cell transplant, which, just as an aside, I was totally, when I went into hospital for my transplant, I was like, okay, I'm going to make sure I get 10 minutes of activity at least in every day. I had this little snackets of Tai Chi things that I was definitely going to do every day. Oh, no, I did not. Okay. I had to have a sit down after having a shower. I was so completely wiped. But you have to accept that and go with it. That's That's what I'm saying. You have to listen to your body. You can't force yourself to do something that you're just not up to.
Yeah.
But the best advice I have was to do a bit more on the days you think you can't and a bit less on the days you think you can.
Oh,
So actually waiting for that energy spurt turned out to me to be quite a bad idea, because I'd get the energy spurt and then I'd be like, right, let's do all the things, and then I would spend the next 3 days asleep. Whereas if I did a little bit less, then I could balance it out a little bit more over time. So you can use that energy spurt, but don't go for a run, go for a walk. Don't do an hour in the gym, do 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then maybe you'll be able to get yourself out there to do that again tomorrow, rather than having to spend the rest of the week asleep.
I think especially those that are on steroids, that is cracking advice, because on steroids you would happily overtrain.
Yes.
Seen it.
So if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, yeah, both of you are just full of so much information, and they want to find you, they want to read your book, Carolyn, where can they find you? Where can they get your book, Getting Your Oomph Back?
The book is available everywhere, globally, actually, mostly online. Some bookshops have it, but you can find it online. You can find it on Amazon. I have a really unusually spelt name, and if you Google Carolyn and Oomph, you find me, and there's some films on YouTube that are specifically around cancer rehab. You can find all sorts of stuff, and you can find my book.
Lovely, thank you so much. And Gemma, where can we find you?
The best place to find me now is on Instagram. I'm just Gemma Seager, or Lipstick Lettuce Lycra should find me if you search that on Instagram as well, which was my fitness blog that I set up about 10 years ago, before any of this happened. So you can find me if you search that as well.
I love it. I love your Instagram. I love how open you are. I love following along with it.
I think all I ever saw was people who were like, there's a lot of kind of super positive, which is great and lovely, but every now and again you just want to see that other people set fire to their beds, which I did do because I was having a bad day and threw a match at it accidentally, I promise. But sometimes you just want to see that other people are just doing as badly as you are.
And you're going to be doing, not setting fire to your bed, but you're going to be doing a session for Shine.
I am, yes.
Yes, so tell us really quickly, what kind of session is it going to be?
12:30, 26th of May. It's just going to be a short 30-minute session. All of my sessions, I always aim to have everybody come out feeling better than they did when they went in. That's the plan. So we're just going to do a short session, which should leave you feeling strong. It'll be some body weight strength things, and then we're going to finish with a little bit of breathing, meditation, calm you down, leave you feeling all motivated for the rest of the day.
Amazing. I can't wait to come along to that. Lovely. Thank you so much to both of you. This has been a fabulous conversation. And thank you to the amazing Radio Facilities for sponsoring our podcast, and to all of you for listening. And if there's something, because exercise has so many different components, if you're like, oh, I really wish that you had talked about that, get in touch. Let us know. Find us at shinecancersupport.org. Till next time. Bye.
Not Your Grandma's Cancer Show.